Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, continuing our deep dive into this Florida Gators program, heading into spring practice, fall camp in the 2024 season. And this week we have the defensive line. Last week we took a look at the offensive line, and this is a defensive line that I think a lot of Gator fans are excited about the progression you might see from a lot of these young players. And one of my pet peeves in terms of how people talk about college football is assuming that guys who are really young, kind of just starting their college careers, are going to stay static and not improve as players, especially on that defensive line where you have to rechange your body. You have to learn a lot more technique along the line of scrimmage. And so to just assume that this Florida Gators defensive line, because they only brought in Joey Slackman and George Gums in the transfer portal, isn't going to improve in 2024, I think is really misguided. You have some guys like Kelby Collins and TJ Searcy, who are young guys that I thought looked really good as true freshmen. And there's no reason to not believe that they're going to take a step in 2024, especially as you bring in Coach Chapman, who I think is a phenomenal coach on that defensive line. Really excited to get into this one. Want to do two things. One, talk about what we saw from this unit in 2023, and then take a look at what this unit is going to look like in 2024. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a shout out to the Florida Gator fans. I mean, a program we've talked a ton about in the transfer portal, on the high school recruitment trail. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown. It truly means a lot to the boys. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section in terms of what you think this Florida Gators defensive line is going to look like in 2024. The best part about doing these deep dives is talking football with you guys, learning from you guys in the comment section. So would love to hear from you guys as well. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And the first thing I have, and I want to take a look at what we saw from this unit in 2023. The first word I have in my film notes is inconsistency. And I say that because I watched the Tennessee game, I watched the Kentucky game, and I sprinkled a few other games in there. And specifically that Tennessee and Kentucky game, it looked like there were just two defensive lines showing up for those games. And the inconsistency to an extent makes sense, right? Austin Armstrong, an extremely young defensive coordinator, combined with a really young Florida Gators defense. But you saw against that Tennessee team a really good offense, a team that ran the ball extremely well in the SEC, held Tennessee to 100 rushing yards in that game, had 14 pressures on Joe Milton. That defensive line looked really, really strong. And you started to kind of believe that this Florida Gators defense could really be a force in 2023. And then you get to the Kentucky game, and it looks like a completely different defensive line. They register only one quarterback hurry on Devin Leary, 329 rushing yards given up. And you take a look at the biggest problem for this Florida team in 2023, I think on both sides of the football, but specifically on that defensive line, was the lack of consistency that you saw from this unit. And so that is probably the starting point. And as you get more veteran guys and you develop some of these guys on that defensive line, Austin Armstrong develops as a defensive coordinator, you think that that consistency will get a little bit more smooth. But that's the one thing Florida really needs to work on. Gave up 5.1 yards per carry. That was 117th in the country. And my takeaway from that number, again, after watching some games back, I'm not going to get up here and say that defensive line was dominant by any means. I don't think it was as bad as that number implies. You look at the second level of that Florida Gators defense and the bad run fits and the missed tackles, specifically in that Kentucky game. I mean, it was, I would probably use the word pathetic at points. Like guys almost showing no interest in wanting to tackle the ball carrier. And yes, that defensive line, it wasn't dominating at the point of attack, but I didn't think it was nearly as bad as the 329 rushing yards showed. So yes, this Florida Gators defense certainly needs to take a step in stopping the run, but I think the angles and the tackling of those linebackers and safeties coming downhill needs to improve as well. The next thing I have in my notes, and probably the biggest question that I have for this Florida Gators defense heading into 2024, is who is going to be the difference maker in the pass rush? And you start looking at some of the numbers and you watch the film. Princely U was phenomenal rushing the passer. We can talk about how he defends the run. He's not on the team anymore, so it don't really matter. But he was the guy in terms of third and long, who is going to be your guy that is getting after the quarterback, right? You take a look at his numbers, 7 sacks on the year, a 20% pass rush win rate. He was dominant as a pass rusher. But outside of Princely U, you didn't really have another guy on that defensive line that really could get after the quarterback at a high level that you could trust on a consistent basis. I mean, Derek Wingo was second in the team in sacks at 2.5 sacks. That kind of tells you the production that you had from this defensive line in the pass rush. So that's probably the biggest question that we have to answer is, one, who is going to be the guy to really get pressure on the quarterback? And then second, I'm looking at that tackles for loss number. I mean, Florida was 104th in creating negative plays in the country. You didn't really see Florida make those negative plays, whether it's a sack, whether it's a tackle for loss, to really kill drives. And teams were just too often able to stay on schedule, run the ball consistently. And I think specifically in Austin Armstrong's defense, where you want to get teams in uncomfortable situations and behind the sticks and then dial up some pressure, Florida didn't get teams enough in those situations. I think that cost them a few games. So now you look at 2024 and say, all right, how does this get better? And I think the first conversation you want to have, and I want to look at this edge group, is the young guys taking a step. And I'm listening to some other takes on the Florida Gators defensive line, and I understand where they're coming from in terms of, yeah, it wasn't great in 2024. There wasn't another elite, or 2023, excuse me. There wasn't another elite guy outside of Princely U. But I think this assumption that a Kelby Collins, a TJ Searcy, a guy like Cam James don't take steps in 2024 going into year two, I think is kind of foolish, because that's where you normally see guys along the line of scrimmage take steps. In fact, it's really rare to see defensive players along the line of scrimmage really play a lot as true freshmen. Now, I thought Kelby Collins, for a true freshman in the SEC, really looked good. So my first question is, all right, who are going to be the guys? And I'm looking at some of the young cats and Kelby Collins to kind of take that step. And the reason I think you can believe they take that step is they're still progressing. They're still learning the sport at the college level. They're still getting their bodies right. The chances of a guy like Kelby Collins taking that step in year two is a hell of a lot bigger than a guy who's going from year 5 to year 6, where you kind of know where they're at. And if the progression was going to happen, it would have happened in the first 5 years. And so if I'm a Florida Gator fan, that's what you're looking for the most, is guys like TJ Searcy, Kelby Collins, Cam James to take that step. I think a guy like Tyreek Sapp was solid, but they weren't difference makers. Can you have some guys on the edge become difference makers in 2024? It's probably the biggest question. Getting Justice Boone back is going to be absolutely massive for this team. A guy like George Gums coming in the transfer portal is a guy that is, you talk about upside. When we broke down his commitment, that's kind of what we talked about. This was a guy that came into college football as a wide receiver, put on weight, is starting to learn that edge rusher position. He's another guy that could potentially break out as well. So that's probably the first question that we want to see. Now you move to the inside, and I think the inside is going to be pretty solid. One, it's deep, and two, you have some young talent coming in. Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks. Caleb Banks, I thought, played really good football for Florida in 2023. Had 19 quarterback hurries, a 10.2% pass rush win rate from a guy on the inside of that defensive line. I mean, that is a solid number. Was good against the run. Cam Jackson, a force on the inside. I think two guys that I'm really keeping an eye on heading into 2024 is, one, the transfer Joey Slackman coming from Penn, and you see him in this list of transfer portals. I mean, there was a reason Joey Slackman had 20-plus offers from Power 5 schools. This is a guy that is a difference maker, not only at the point of attack, but in the pass rush as well. And so there are some guys like a Cam Jackson who you kind of know is not going to stuff the stat sheet, but is going to be solid in the middle. Joey Slackman, I think, could be a stat sheet stuffer in terms of getting after the passer, stopping the run. And then you bring in a guy in LJ McCray who, again, going back to that conversation of it's rare to have true freshmen come in along the line of scrimmage and produce at a high level in the SEC. LJ McCray is a rare breed. Like, we don't see many LJ McCrays. You don't grow LJ McCrays on trees. And he's a guy that physically is ready to step on campus and be productive. So you start suddenly looking at that inside of the defensive line. You toss in some guys like Desmond Watson or Jamari Lyons. It's a deep group that has potential to have some game records on this unit, right? A guy like Joey Slackman, potentially a guy like LJ McCray. We just saw someone from Peter Woods, a true freshman on the inside for Clemson, truly be a game record as a true freshman. So LJ McCray, Joey Slackman, kind of the guys that I have my eyes on as being difference makers on the inside. So you kind of project this unit in 2024, and I think the one word that kind of comes to mind is development. This is and we've been kind of banging the table for this kind of for the last 2 years, is this is a Florida Gators team that was young. And we kind of said heading into 2023, winning 6-7 games would probably be a win for Florida in that season. Now, you only won 5, and I think that was largely because you had some problems, multiple different problems on the offensive line, and a lot of special team errors that kind of cost you some games in crucial moments. That season could have easily had 6-7 wins if you clean up some of those mistakes. And so we kind of said 2023 wasn't going to be a year Florida was competing for an SEC championship game. And you look at 2024, and although they might not be the number one contender, if you will, in terms of an SEC championship, but I think this Florida defensive line kind of represents where this Florida Gators program is going. It's a young group that has a lot of talent. And this is what's going to cause Billy Napier to either have a successful career in Gainesville or probably not be the coach heading into 2025. And that is the development of this young talent that he's been able to bring in. Guys like Kelby Collins, TJ Searcy. You go to a guy like LJ McCray. This is the year where you need to see these guys kind of take that step. And so that's what I'm looking for. We'll obviously be very plugged into spring practice, taking a look at the spring game. That's what we're looking for. This young defensive line to take some steps and become kind of difference makers up front. Next week, we have the Florida Gators offensive skill position on deck. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.